Erev Tov Rabotai, we're continuing with our Mishna Yomi Masechet Megillah. We're up to Perek Daled Mishnah Bet. Today's Mishnah should be Leilun Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana, Aranbaev, Neriyahu ben Burcha Israelov, Menuchatam began Eden, Amen, and Leavdil ben Chaim Nechaim for the Refuah Shenemav Daniel Shalom ben Rosa, Betoch Shah Chulei Israel. The Mishnah begins Berashei Chodeshim Ubchulo Shel Moed Korin Arba'a. On Rosh Chodesh and on Chol HaMoed, 4 people are called to read the Torah. The reason for having an extra reader on these days, we will explain later on in the Mishnah. En pochatin mehen ven mosifin alehen. We may not have fewer than 4 readers or more than 4. Ven maftirin b'navim. We do not read Haftarah. Now, calling more than 4 people or reading Haftarah would prolong the service, which would put a burden on the congregation. On these days, even people may need to go to work. And even on Chol HaMoed, when most work is forbidden, it is permitted for the sake of preventing a loss and for certain other purposes. So again, to prevent a burden on the congregation when they may need to go to work, we do not read a haftarah. The one who begins the reading of the Torah and the one who ends it recites the blessing before it and after it, while the other readers do not say either blessing. We explained already in Mishnah 1 that today the prevalent custom is before the person reads his section. After he reads his section, he recites both blessings. Right? He makes one before he starts and one after. Zak Mishnah says this is the rule. On any day when a musaf offering was brought, and in addition the musaf prayer is recited on these days, but it is not a Yom Tov, meaning Rosh Chodesh or and Chol HaMoed, 4 people are called to read the Torah. B'Yom Tov Chamisha and Yom Tov 5 people are called. B'Yom HaKippurim Shisha and Yom Kippur 6. B'Shabbat Shiva and Shabbat 7. On each of these occasions has greater sanctity than the one before it. So to reflect the increased Kedusha sanctity, an additional person is called to read from the Torah. On Rosh Chodesh and Chol HaMoed, when Musaf offerings were brought in the temple, 4 people are called instead of the minimum 3. On Yom Tov, when Melecha is forbidden and is punishable by Malkut, lashes, 5 people are called. On Yom Kippur, when Melecha carries the more severe of punishment of Karet, which is cutting off of the soul, 6 people are called. And on Shabbat, when Melecha carries the most severe punishment of Skila, stoning, 7 people are called. And like we explained, at Mincha of Shabbat, however, we call only 3 people, because again, the sages do not want to prolong the Mincha service. Now, more rules about reading the Torah Yom Tov, Yom Kippur, and Shabbat. And Puchatin men aval musifin alen. We may not have fewer than the number of readers that we said, but we may have more than them. As again, Rashi explains, but again, Shulchan Aruch discusses it in chapter 282 on Orach Chaim Halacha 1. Umaftirin banavi, and we read Haftarah since people cannot work on these days of Yom Tov, Yom Kippur, and Shabbat. Prolonging the Torah reading is not considered to be a burden. Therefore, we may call more than the minimum number of people to the Torah, and we must read Haftarah. Hapoteach v'achotem b'Torah mevalech lefaneh u'lachareha. The one who begins the reading of the Torah and the one who ends it recites the blessing before and after it, while the other readers do not say either blessing. Again, like we explained, that is not the custom of today. That is the end of Mishnah Bet. We continue with Mishnah Gimel. This Mishnah teaches that the obligatory readings from the Torah and the prophets may take place only in the presence of 10 men, known as a minyan. Together with this law, it lists several other mitzvot and activities that also may not be performed except with the minyan. And posin Shema, we may not divide the Shema. Now, if 10 men arrived in the synagogue after the congregation had recited Shema and missed Kaddish and Baruch Hu, which may be said only in the presence of a minyan, they can still recite those prayers. One of them says on behalf of the others Kaddish, Baruch Hu, and the first of the 2 blessings that are said before the Shema. This is described as dividing the Shema because they say only one of those 2 blessings. Although that blessing does not require a minyan, they're obligated to say it because Baruch Hu, let us bless, is a call to the congregation to recite a blessing. Therefore, if they do not say a blessing at that point, they appear like chas v'shalom heretics who do not want to bless God. Then the prayer leader may not go to his place before the ark and repeat the Shmona Esrei. Then the Kohanim may not lift their hands and recite the priestly blessing. Then we may not read the Torah. Then maftirin banavi, and we may not read a haftarah. Each of the prayers and readings that we listed to this point is a davar shebikdusha, a matter of sanctity which may not be recited except in the presence of a minyan. Then osin ma'amad moshav, we may not observe the practice of standing and sitting when carrying the deceased to the cemetery. On the way to a burial, it was the custom to pause to deliver eulogies. The leader would announce, "Sit, dear one, sit." They would sit and listen to eulogies. When they finished, he would announce, "Stand, dear one, stand." After continuing a short distance, they repeat the process. This was done 7 times. Now, when only a few people are present, we do not trouble the leader to go through this and to call them dear ones. After all, if only a small gathering is addressed as dear ones, what greater title would be left to address a large gathering? Therefore, Rashi explains on page 23 in Masechet Megillah, the entire practice is not observed unless a minyan is present. Ve'en omrim birkat avelim, we may not say the mourner's blessing after the burial. Now, after burial, it was the custom to sit in the street and recite a number of blessings in honor of the mourners. These blessings were enacted by the sages to be recited only with the minyan. Today, these blessings are not recited at all, as the Torah discusses in Yoreh De'ah, chapter 376. Ve'tan chumei avelim, we may not form a road to offer comfort to the mourners after burial. Now, after burial, it was customary for those present to form rows. The mourners stood still while the rows of people filled past them and offered condolences. The Mishnah teaches that a row should not be formed unless it includes at least 10 men. Ubekat chatanim, we may not say the 7 wedding blessings at a wedding or at a meal eaten during the 7 days after a wedding. This is based on the example of Boaz, who gathered 10 men when he married Ruth, as it says in Masechet Ketubot, page 7a. Then mizamenin b'Shem, we may not use God's name to invite people to say Birkat Hamazon. This invitation, which is known as Zimun, includes a blessing. We add the word Elokeinu, our God, to the blessing only in the presence of a minyan, because it does not befit the honor due to the name of Hashem to publicly proclaim it before a smaller group, as the Gemara Masechet Megillah explains on page 23b. Pachot me'asara, the Mishnah says, none of these activities may be done in the presence of fewer than 10 men. Uba kalkaot, when someone wants to buy land that belongs to the temple, tishav v'chohen, its value must be determined by 10 men. 9 of whom can be ordinary Jews, and 1 of whom must be a Kohen. V'adam ke'yotzeh behen, a person who vows to donate his own market value to the temple must have his value determined in the same way by 10 men, including a Kohen. As the Rav explains, now the commentators explain, a person's market value is the price he would bring if he were sold as a slave. The law stated here that determining the value of gifts to the temple requires a minyan, including a Kohen, is derived from verses in the Torah, as the Gemara explains on page 23b in Masechet Megillah. And that is the Rabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.